Summer is by far the hardest time of year for me to make it through with my chronic health issues. And I thought, as part of documenting my journey along the way, I would share a little bit about summer and how I have managed some of my issues throughout the years, what has helped me and worked for me, what I've learned, what it's been like, I guess, overall, and to just kind of document this current summer and year and what it ends up being like for me overall. So we are at the start of summer right now, and as I am recording this right now, I feel better than I have in previous years. So before I was diagnosed with POTS and mast cell activation syndrome and hypermobility, I had no idea, what I was dealing with. And I had a lot of summers where it was difficult for me to even make it through. If I really went into detail about what it was like for me, I don't know if I could fully describe it. My worst years were the years when I didn't have answers yet, and I was scared, and I truly felt like and thought that I was going to die, or that, um, you know, people were just, the doctors were just not going to be able to figure it out or understand what was going on. I felt very scared a lot of the time because, and I think this is the experience for a lot of people with these conditions, when you go in with these very scary symptoms of like severe tachycardia, heart palpitations, near fainting, muscle weakness that is so severe that you are wheelchair bound. You have these allergy issues where you're so short of breath you can't catch your breath. You are just struggling with heat intolerance, your temperature can't regulate itself. It feels like your body has just kind of turned against you, and there is no way for you to regain control of it. And the common, I think, diagnosis that especially women will receive in these kinds of moments is anxiety. But if you're somebody who has experienced anxiety, you are then left with this feeling of even more fear, not from anxiety, but genuine fear, because you are very aware that what you're feeling and what you're experiencing is definitely not anxiety. Um, and it just feels like you are constantly being misunderstood. You're constantly not taken seriously, gaslit. It's really difficult. So my worst summers were spent completely immobilized and disabled entirely. I was not able to leave my bed or my couch, so I was couch ridden or bedridden. I had to spend months going around in a wheelchair to get places because I could not walk properly. I couldn't wash my own hair because the tachycardia was so bad. I couldn't, stand safely in the shower to wash my hair. I wasn't able to stand and cook meals, so I had to have meals delivered um, constantly throughout the summer. I couldn't even go outside to put my feet in the grass or to sit out in a chair and watch the birds in the trees and, enjoy summer. And for somebody who previously to my conditions really amplifying and becoming very severe, I was pretty active. So I think another um, uh, a common thing that people with these conditions might hear is that maybe you developed this because of deconditioning, because you weren't moving enough or being active enough. And I can say for certain that that is not the case, I think, for most people, and especially in my case. I was very adventurous. I loved to be outside. I spent a lot of time outside. Any free time that I could get in the summers, I would spend outside, except I still had heat intolerance. I would say for many, many years before my diagnoses and before diagnoses, I don't know really how you pronounce it, but um, before I reached that point, I was still symptomatic and I still had these conditions. In hindsight, I can see there were times where I had to lay down because I was almost going to pass out. I couldn't drive. I had to pull over to the side of the road or have somebody else drive for me because it was um, just causing me a lot of dizziness. And when I would spend time outside, even though I was very active, I had to spend time outdoors like in the early morning hours or in the later evening hours and stay inside in the middle of the day because even in those years where I was functioning and very active, I still had, symptoms. They just weren't to the point that, they were um, entirely, like, completely disabling me. So, one of my favorite things to do was to be outside, be on trails, go for walks. I took at least a 30-minute walk every single day. So it definitely wasn't due to deconditioning for me. I enjoyed taking pictures of different things that I found to be really beautiful out in nature. And I thought that I would share some of my favorite photos here. And I don't know how clear they're going to be, but I thought that I would just share some of um, my favorite years in the past being outside and, finding these beautiful spots and things to see. So one of the hardest things, if not, I would say maybe possibly the hardest thing about me having my conditions become as bad as they got is the fact that I could no longer tolerate doing these things that I used to do and that I used to love. My pot symptoms would just be debilitating, or my mast cell symptoms would be, and it did not allow for me to experience life in the same way anymore. So I had to find ways to adapt where I could try to still enjoy as much as I could without over exerting myself or overdoing it and putting myself into a dangerous situation where my symptoms became, disabling. I think another very difficult part of these conditions is that if you look at um, somebody who has POTS or mast cell issues or hypermobility, they often don't appear to be sick. They don't appear to be sick at all or struggling with any sort of an illness on the outside, but you cannot see, what is going on for them internally and what is going on the inside. And I think it just makes it hard to be taken seriously. It makes it hard to um, convey, to help others to understand just how severe and disabling these conditions actually are. So I once that I did get the diagnoses that I received, I started to find different helpful ways to help manage my symptoms. And there isn't any sort of a cure. So even when you implement, certain things, they're not necessarily going to make your conditions go away, but they do help to manage them and help to um, sometimes keep you out of flare ups. Sometimes they can help you to just feel a little bit better. So I thought that I would share some of the things that I have learned and am learning currently as I, navigate all of this. So the first thing that I realized was that electrolytes are very important, especially in the summer months. I have tried so many different kinds, and most of them I have found I cannot tolerate due to the artificial sweeteners, or surprisingly, a lot of them contain like fructose, which I don't know why they even put that in things, but I discovered that I have an intolerance to fructose and FODMAPs. So when I would be taking those electrolyte packets, I would have like extreme GI issues and not understanding, what was going on or why I was feeling sick after having something that was supposed to make me feel better, but that was a part in it. So I ended up finding the ones that I could that contained stevia instead of like sucralose or sucrose or fructose. And surprisingly, the ones with the stevia actually are helpful in managing my symptoms and do not give me any sort of GI issues. One of the brands that I stick with quite a bit is this one, and this brand does not contain a whole lot of sodium. So taking this for POTS really, it's not that beneficial, but it does have a lot of magnesium in it, which I think can be helpful if you are somebody that is often low in magnesium, which I frequently am. So these I find are easy for me to digest. One that I'm going to be trying this year is this LMNT electrolyte packet. It seems to have pretty good reviews on it. People who have POTS seem to really like this one. It has 43% of your daily value of salt. And when I was growing up, I was kind of conditioned, I guess, to believe that salt, an excessive amount of salt, is actually not good for you. So coming out of that mindset has been kind of hard for me, and a challenge to kind of get past, because there's still this part of me that wonders if I overdo it, if that's not good for me. But I have learned that with this particular condition, it is necessary and vital that you have enough sodium in your diet and that you pair it with water. So, water is extremely important as well. You need to make sure that you're drinking a lot of water all day long, but not just water alone, it has to be paired with sodium to help to manage like symptoms like tachycardia and brain fog, and all of um, the symptoms of that go along with POTS, I guess. Um, so I've been hesitant to try this, but I'm going to be trying this year and hoping that this helps me, and that I tolerate it okay. This one also contains stevia as a sweetener, so I was happy to see that. Um, so there have been some summers that have, for some reason, they've been a little bit better for me, where I've been able to at least go outside, put my feet in the grass, sit outside, enjoy watching the birds and all of that. I am somebody that really enjoys that, and so that is always something that I never take for granted, because I realize going through all of this, I've come to realize that nothing is guaranteed. You can be fine and functioning, and you can seem to be okay one minute and then go into a flare up. Something causes you to go into a flare up, and it can be months sometimes before you're able to slowly get back to somewhat of a baseline. So I never take for granted when I am able to even just sit outside or put my feet in the grass anymore. And um, I thought that I would talk about what I am trying to do this summer that is a little bit different from previous years. I basically was just stuck in survival mode, I think, for quite some time, trying to comprehend, everything that I was learning with this is what I'm dealing with and this is what it means and all of that. And now I'm starting to get to this point where I'm able to kind of process it a little bit more and piece things together to help me function a little bit better if at all possible. So the areas that I want to focus on this summer are sleep, my hormones, nutrition, exercise, and stress and mental health. And I thought that I would just kind of share a little bit of how I am preparing for summer and how I'm kind of organizing it all, and maybe it can be helpful to somebody else as well. So, some of these things take a lot of mental energy, as it is just, a lot to kind of put it all together. I took a few weeks before the start of summer or summer break for kids, getting out of school and all of that. I sat down a little bit every day and kind of compiled what I wanted my days to look like, or as close to looking like as I could imagine. And I have always been a list maker. I've always liked to have a schedule and check things off and make a list. And I have felt more regulated when I've been able to do that. One of the things that has been difficult as well is that since my conditions got really symptomatic, I no longer could follow my lists and my routines like I typically would. I had to start to take things and move them from one day out, like a few days out, or the next week, or even the next month or two out if I was in the middle of like a really bad flare up. And that was dysregulating to me, immensely dysregulating, because I just felt really thrown off and overwhelmed by the change in my routine. And I think that one good thing that has come from having to, um, you know, move things out and constantly have things changing in that kind of a way is that it's forced me to have to be okay with things not being as I have listed out or scheduled. And I often would struggle where if I couldn't do things exactly like I had planned, I would just forget about them or feel like I failed at them or feel like I couldn't do them and just give up on them. And I think that there are some times where, you have to come to that sort of a realization and let things go. But I think that this has really shown me how to come back to things that I would have just kind of given up on. And just because it doesn't go perfectly doesn't mean that, I should throw the towel in entirely and, just kind of work with myself and my limitations and what I am able to do. And to remind myself that it's not the end of the world if things have to change a little bit and it's just going to be uncomfortable and um, might feel really stressful in the moment. So I took a piece of paper, just regular paper, and split my day up into sections, like morning, afternoon, evening, and bedtime. And I don't have anything really serious on here, like that's going to drain my energy. I just have very simple reminders, things that most people probably don't need to be reminded of, like taking my medication in the morning and eating breakfast. If I don't have something to go off of like this, I often will become distracted and forget to eat breakfast. And I feel like with my chronic health issues, even if I don't want to eat breakfast or feel like eating it, it is good for me to have at least something, just to keep my digestive system regulated as much as possible and to help me to have energy from like the nutrients in food. So that is something that I put on my list to kind of start my day off, and just different things that I can do throughout the day that can help me to heal as much as possible and to tolerate summer as well as I possibly can. Um, Another thing that I did when it comes to like my morning routine is with breakfast, I broke it down into three different options for me to choose from. I tend to get really overstimulated and overwhelmed by a lot of choices or distracted by a lot of different things. So I figured that I would have three options that I know are easy for my body to digest and I tolerate well. And those are things like Cheerios with rice milk, oatmeal um, with sun butter in it, or a blueberry smoothie. So I do not have issues with those foods. And that way I have a variety of things to eat and I can choose between one of those three options. If I get sick of something, I can choose something else. And it can be a good start to my morning. So that is one way that I um, thought that I would kind of help take the stress or the mental load off of trying to figure out, um, you know, how to make sure that I am eating properly and everything that goes along with that aspect of things. And then I also took some time to write out on little pieces of paper grocery lists, weekly grocery lists for the entire summer. And I often will have a temptation to keep going back and like switching my lists or editing them, and I can think of, something else that I'd rather have instead of something else. And I often will do that, but this summer, one of my goals is to just leave my list how they are and just deal with it and, get what I have down to get. And I did this mainly to help with the stress aspect of things and just taking the mental load off of that. So if I am feeling really symptomatic over, heat intolerance, or I'm having just a really hard time with my mast cell issues and not feeling good, I don't have to sit down and then stress out over what am I going to do for this and, how am I going to, think of all of these options of, what I'm going to eat and all of that. So that is something that I took some time over a few weeks to do, and that I think might be helpful in managing just the stress from that aspect of life. And for mental health, I am currently in therapy. I have been for a while, and today I actually went to a session where my therapist was going over um, a way of being more relaxed when you're feeling overwhelmed, and it was like a meditation kind of an exercise. And I will make a video sharing specifically what it is and like how to go through it because I found it to be really helpful. And it's basically like a meditation kind of a thing where you envision a spot. It could be an imagined place, it could be a place that you actually have been to or have experienced in like real life. And it just walks you through noticing with your senses all of the things that are around you and what they um, sound like, what they feel like, what they taste like, using that as a way of like grounding into the present moment. And usually I have a hard time with this because my mind will go a bunch of different places and I can't focus. But as she was walking me through it, it actually did work. And I was able to think of places that I used to enjoy going to when I was able to be more active outside and really put myself back in those moments. And maybe some of the places that I had shared with the photographs that I had taken, I can kind of put myself back in that moment where I was there and what I saw and what I felt and all of that. And your mind actually feels in some way like it is actually in that space again, and helps, I think, with like PTSD and anxiety and all of that. So I am going to try to do that on days when I wish I could go outside, or I wish that I could, go and do those things and I can't um, do them. For exercise, um, the last few days have tried to do it's not a program, but it is a YouTube, like a clip, a exercise clip. It is Pilates for hypermobility. And I have avoided doing something like that for a while because it doesn't take much for me to feel like I overexerted myself. And I often end up feeling worse after exercise instead of better. But I really want to strengthen my joints and my muscles to the best of my ability to try to prevent my joints and everything from getting worse over time. I can't really imagine that. So I thought that I would try um, something that I had found, and I will link it in the description, but it actually was really helpful for me. It wasn't something that made me feel like I was overheating or that I was pushing myself too hard or like my muscles were really hurting. So I think hopefully I can stick with that and keep doing that, and hopefully it is helpful for me. I used to do yoga years ago and I really enjoyed it, but I stopped doing it for a few different reasons. I learned that yoga is actually not good at all for hypermobility. It just stretches your muscles beyond, the point that they should be stretching, and in turn, causes more issues for your joints. And then there also is a spiritual component that I wasn't aware of. And I love to learn about different cultures, and I find other people's way of living and their beliefs very fascinating and interesting, and I like to learn about them, but I like to adhere to my personal beliefs. And I didn't realize that yoga is very much connected to like the Hindu religion, where there is worship of multiple gods. And I personally believe in one God. So I did not feel comfortable participating in that anymore. And that was something, I didn't know um, years ago. And I found that to be just an interesting thing. Um, so for my hormones, I have felt like I have been in perimenopause for some time now. Um, right when my symptoms of mast cell and POTS started to intensify, I actually was starting to shift over hormonally, and I could see this intuitively, feel this as well, but um, my cycles started to become different from usual. So I normally would have about a 7-day cycle, and all of a sudden they became 11 days and no less than 11 days. So for the past 5 years, I have not had a cycle less than 11 days long. And at the most, it can be 14 days. And so that started to change for me right at the same time that I started to have intensifying mast cell issues and POTS symptoms. I found it interesting as well because a lot of the symptoms of perimenopause kind of overlap with symptoms of like dysautonomia and mast cell symptoms like heart palpitations, tachycardia, temperature dysregulation, and even things like itching, like the insides of your ears itching. I thought that was mast cell related, but it's actually also connected to perimenopause. Um, so this past year, I struggled even more with excruciating pain. I was told I likely have a condition called adenomyosis. I think that's how you pronounce it. And it is like endometriosis, except it's opposite. So I think endometriosis tissue grows on the outer portions of the organs, and with adenomyosis, it grows on the inner portions. And I was told that the only way to really solve it is for me to get a hysterectomy. I am kind of concerned, overall how that will affect me systemically going through that kind of a surgery. And if this is perimenopause and it will resolve with menopause, you know, maybe it would just be worth me waiting it out and trying to make it through this phase in my life. So the doctors and everybody that I've mentioned this to, healthcare related wise, doesn't seem to think that that is what is going on for me. But when I research it and when I, listen to specialists that share their expertise online and through YouTube, I can clearly see that this is most likely what I'm dealing with. Um, so this past year, my cycles have been really heavy. I've experienced more clots, like softball size clots, where that has never happened to me before. I actually ended up going into the emergency room last summer for it because it scared me really bad. I didn't know what was happening or if something was wrong. I had my iron and my ferritin checked, and my ferritin was very low. So I was put on an iron supplement last summer, and I've been on it for about a year now. And my ferritin is still not in optimal range, but it is better than last summer. So I have that going into this summer that is better than last year. So I'm hoping that that might help me and make a little bit of a difference in, just tolerating summer overall. But I was following a woman who is certified in regulating hormones, and she was trying to regulate her progesterone. And she was explaining it by saying if you are in a constant state of fight or flight and your cortisol is high, which mine was checked a couple of years ago, and both times it was high, your sodium levels will actually be lower and you will need more sodium. And when your cortisol is affected in that kind of a way, it causes your progesterone to drop and your estrogen to spike. And I found that to be really interesting because my issues that I've been having seem to be with, the hormone imbalance. I just went in a couple of weeks ago for a breast biopsy for 2 masses found in my left breast that turned out to be just benign fibroadenomas. But when I researched more about fibroadenomas, they are most common in like early menstruation years and up to age 35, which I am past that. And considering the fact that I've never dealt with these before, and I'm past that stage in my life, I was wondering, what exactly is going on with my body. I found that fibroadenomas can be really estrogen kind of driven, and with perimenopause, you have lowering estrogen, but then you have erratic spikes where your estrogen will go and spike really high. And I'm wondering if maybe that played into why my fibroadenomas had formed. I know they're considered to be normal and, benign and common for a lot of women, but hormonally, I'm just trying to figure out, what's going on with my body so that I can support it the best way possible. So this woman that I've been following that was trying to balance her hormones had said that getting outside in the early morning hours where the sun is just coming up, something about the way that the sun is in the morning, it helps to regulate your progesterone. And I can see how it would help to de-stress you because that time of day is really beautiful. But I just found it to be interesting, and it was something new that I learned. I didn't know that being outside during that time could just directly impact and affect your progesterone and your hormone levels. So one of the things that I am going to try to do this summer is to get outside in those early morning hours to try to get that sunlight so that it can help my hormones overall. And then with sleep, one of my goals is to try to make my bedtime routine really relaxing, kind of de-stressing. trying to spend a lot of time off of screens this summer. I have written down recipes from Pinterest of like overnight oats and smoothie recipes so that I'm not tempted to go on there and look them up, because then I know I will be trying to find all different kinds of recipes and it will just lead me down a rabbit hole that, will just ultimately keep me, I think, um, in a state of like overstimulation. So I am trying to, around like the hours before bed, prepare for the next day a little bit, pray a little bit, have some time where maybe I just read a simple book that's not really engaging so that my mind can kind of unwind, and then turning on some kind of relaxing or calming music, or some sort of a calming maybe podcast to listen to fall asleep, and to have the room be a little bit darker, um, without having, like the TV on or anything. And my goal is to try to get at least 9 hours of sleep. I don't know if that's going to be possible. Sleep has always been difficult for me since I have been very little. Ever since I can remember, I have woken up multiple times a night. I think it's trauma related for me, without my body really being able to connect, that was the reasoning behind it. I think that has been the driving factor behind my sleep disruption. Um, Also, just, at times I have vivid dreams often, but I do sleep. It's just that I have very disrupted sleep, and also have been in the process of being tested for sleep apnea because I had a home sleep study done that showed I had 2 choking episodes an hour. And I've fallen asleep at my friend's house where she had come to wake me up because she was scared because I stopped breathing, and just, was like, you need to get that looked at. So I've been trying to get as good of sleep as I possibly can to support just my overall functioning. Some other things that are different this year compared to previous summers is that this year I am on cromolyn sodium for my mast cell activation disorder, and I've been on that since January. And it hasn't cured me, but it has helped and made a difference enough to the point where I am going to continue taking it. And I'm also avoiding FODMAPs still as much as I can. My diet is about 90% gluten free, and I would say about 80 to 85% dairy free. My daughter also deals with allergies. She has allergies to peanuts, dust mites, and cats, and she recently had more allergy testing done that showed she had a mild allergy to milk as well. So her allergist had suggested that we switch to rice milk because it's very easy to digest and his best option. And I trust him a lot because he has been very good, in terms of like taking care of my daughter. So I have tried different plant milks like oat milk and almond milk, and I did like them, but they weren't so good that I felt like I could have them like daily. With the rice milk, though, I do feel like I can have that every single day. So I made that transition over with my daughter to eliminate dairy in that kind of a way. And from my understanding, rice milk is low FODMAP and, just like I said, easier to digest. So I do have some shredded cheese once in a while on things still, but other than that, I am pretty dairy free and pretty close to being completely gluten free. And that has helped me as well. Surprisingly, I didn't know how much of a difference it would make. This is the longest I've ever stuck with changing my diet in this kind of a way. I still do have issues where my digestive system just does not function at all, but it is much more manageable and tolerable eating this way than it was before I started to eat this way. So going into the summer, that is also different for me. I have tried to figure out what to do about the heat intolerance. That seems to be my most problematic issue with summer. And last year it was one of the hottest summers on record, and I do have an air conditioner, but it couldn't keep up with the heat. And I ended up in some pretty bad flare-ups where I had to go to the hospital a lot to get IV fluids. And I just had heat exhaustion a lot. So this year I've been trying to think of what I can do to try to manage that or help myself through it. I thought that I would try a couple different products, and I ended up getting this little cooling chili mini wrap towel by the brand Frog Togs. I got this from Walmart for $2.97, somewhere around there. I think it was $2.97. And you run this under like really cold water and wring it out and put it around your neck, and it feels like the texture of kind of almost like a yoga mat. And they have bigger sizes as well, but I wanted to see if I would like the little one or if it would make a difference. And I will use this because something is better than nothing, but this is not something that really made a huge noticeable difference for me. It didn't really have the cooling effect that I was hoping it would have. So I don't think it's, for me personally, I didn't find it worth getting like the larger version of it, but I figured I would just try it and see. And then when I was at Five Below, the store Five Below, I found these little fans for $3, which I thought was a pretty good deal. And I wasn't sure what to expect of it because it's little and it's just this little plastic, $3 fan, but it has 3 different speeds. So there's a low, a medium, and a high. And for, being $3 and being this little, it actually is very powerful. It is charged by plugging it into like a device. I haven't tried to do that yet, but it comes with this little cord. And I thought for $3 this was a really good deal. Last year I had a spray bottle, like a water bottle, that I would spray myself down with and try to sit, in front of like the air conditioner and to keep cool. And I think if I have a spray bottle and then this, that might be helpful. I will also put in the description some things that I found other people suggesting to try with these conditions to make it through summer. Some of the things I think are kind of expensive. For me, at least, they like some of the cooling wraps that are probably better, better quality, I guess. But if you are on a budget and you are looking just for something to, get through, this little fan is actually pretty powerful and only $3. So I thought that I would just share some of the things that I have learned, the ways that summer has affected me with these conditions, and what I am trying to do this summer to help my overall health and to make it through and survive summer. This is just a really hard time of year, I think, for a lot of us with these conditions. And yeah, so this is the start of summer. So far this year, we have had some very hot days, but it hasn't been really humid so far like it was last year. And I'm hoping it stays that way. I'm not expecting it to with how crazy the weather is everywhere lately. But I think that, based on how I feel at the start of this year, I'm not thinking that I will have a very rough one like I did last year or previous years, but you never know. Like I said, something can kind of throw you off without you even expecting it. So I guess I'll see. This is just me kind of documenting, where I'm at now, and I guess I'll see how I feel at the end of summer. But I hope that everybody that has these conditions has a safe summer and that you guys can enjoy it as much as you possibly can. And that is it for this one.